Hello, this is Sarah Hardy at the University of Maine at Farmington, and the main purpose of this video is to provide instruction for my intermediate statistics students in using Rcmdr to do 2 sample t-tests, with a couple other Rcmdr tips thrown in along the way. So I've already opened R and loaded Rcmdr. And my first tip is that I have found it helpful to downsize the main R window, which is where your graphs are also going to pop up, so that the R window and the Rcmdr window are next to each other instead of overlaid. And the first step in doing the assignment is to create your data set. The first way you can do that is to enter the data into a spreadsheet. To do that, you'll want to put your variable names in the first row, and I've just used a very generic group and response. You'll want to name it something that would fit with whatever example that you're actually working on. And the important thing is to notice that each observation has to go on a separate row. You can't put all the observations from one group in one column and all the observations from another group in another column. So notice, for example, my first row here says group A, and it has the response. And this is just some randomly generated data that I made up to do this video. After you've entered your data in the spreadsheet and saved it, you would go to Data and import data, either from a text file if you saved it as comma delimited or .csv, or an Excel file if you saved it as an Excel file. The second way of entering your data is to enter it directly in Rcmdr. So to do that, you would go to Data, New Data Set. You would enter some name. It's going to automatically call it data set, but you would want to call it something that fits the example. And I'm going to say OK. And it's going to pop up a little editor that looks very much like a spreadsheet. So you can start by naming your variables. Okay, I'm just again going to call it group, but you would call it whatever fits your example. And that's a character variable. And the other one is response, and that's a numeric variable. And then I would just enter in my data. I'm just making this data up for this video. And so on and so forth, until you have all your data entered in. Since I've already loaded this data once before, I'm just going to select it from my active data sets. So there's 3 things we need to check to decide exactly what test to do. And so we need to check the standard deviations to see if they're off by a factor of 2. We need to check the box plots to see if there's any outliers. And if we have small sample sizes, we need to check the quantile plots to see if the data is normally distributed. So to start with, I'm going to check the standard deviations, and I'm going to do that by pressing Statistics, Summaries, Numerical Summaries, and it's going to pop right up here with it's going to list your numeric variables. I want to look at this by groups because I want to see the standard deviation for both group A and group B. So I'm going to do that, and then it will allow you to choose a group. So say OK. Okay, and it will give me the standard deviations. So we notice I have 2 something and 3 something. They're not off by a factor of 2. The next step is to do a box plot, and you've already done one of these before, but I'll demonstrate it anyways. So go to Graph, Box Plot, Response. I want to plot by groups. Okay. Okay, and here's my box plot, and we see that there are no outliers. So the third thing to do is to look at the quantile plots. And this is kind of complicated because we need to draw a separate plot for each group. So we're going to need to actually subset our data to do that. So to subset your data, go to Data, Active Dataset, Subset Active Dataset, and you'll see this window. So I want to include all the variables, and this is where it gets tricky. You have to put in your subset expression. So I want all the cases where group equals group A. So group equals. It's important you have to put a double equals. You also have to put the actual category in quotes. So I'm going to put group A. And this is not forgiving at all. If you misspell something, for example, if I put lowercase group, it wouldn't work. So those are the two things. Be careful you put in a double equal sign, and be careful that you put this in exactly the way it appears in the data set. And you also need to put it in a name. If you don't put a name, a little pop-up will come up to remind you. So I'm going to call this name for new data set, data A. Okay. And so that makes data A become my active data set. And at that point then I can go and do my quantile comparison plot. I'm going to hit OK, and then it pops up. Notice that we actually do have one point here that is outside of the boundaries. So this turns out that it's not going to be appropriate for a t-test. However, we'll demonstrate doing all the ways. Okay, and then you have to repeat that same process to do the quantile plot from the other group. And so to do that, you first of all have to go and select your original active data set again so that you can subset it. Another choice, and this is our Rcmdr trick that I'm going to show you, is that you can also use this script window to issue commands. So I'm going to go and copy the two lines that I got from subsetting the data and doing the quantile plot, and I'm going to paste them back in, and then I'm just going to go in and edit this. So I'm going to say I want data B to be all the data from group B, and then I'm going to do a QQ plot of data B, and then highlight that, right click, and hit submit. Okay. So the other Rcmdr tip that I'm going to show you is that it's often nice to have your graphs all on the same page, so you don't have to do quite as much cutting and pasting into your Word document. So the way to do that is there's a command, and as far as I know you have to issue it from this script window, and that's par, which stands for graphing parameters. And so par mf row equals C, and I want to have one row with 3 subsections. So this is the same kind of indexing as a matrix. The first number stands for how many rows you want in your grid, and the second number stands for how many columns you want in your grid. Okay, so I'm going to submit this line by, again, putting my cursor on it and right-clicking and choosing Submit. And if you're only going to do one line, that's all you need to do. And then I'm going to go back up to this box plot. I'm going to submit that line. Notice now it's going over only in the third spot over here, 1/3 of the graph. And then I'm going to go and redo this QQ plot, and I'm going to redo this QQ plot. Now I have them all handily on one plot grid that I can cut and paste into my Word document. Okay, next you're ready to do your hypothesis test. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to start by showing how you would do a t-test. Okay, so you go to Statistics, Means, Independent Samples t-test. You'll pick your grouping variable, and in this case, we're only going to have one, but there could be more choices if you have more categorical variables that had 2 categories. And select your response. Okay. Then you're going to select whether you want a not equal to test, or a two-sided test, or less than test, or greater than test. Very important to pay attention to what order your difference is going to be in. And I believe that it's going to just take whatever group occurs first and make that as your first group, and then your second, whatever group occurs second, as your second group. So, for example, if you want to do a less than test or greater than test, you need to think about what your direction is. So in this case, I'm just going to do a two-sided test. And then I have to answer the question, should I assume equal variances? Since our standard deviations were not off by more than a factor of 2, I'm going to change that to yes. And hit OK. And then down in your output window, you will get the results. You'll see the results of your t-test. That you can cut and paste this into your Word document. And what we see here is that our p-value is 0.02 for this example. Now, as we saw, we actually have one variable that's outside these bounds. So we should do a Wilcox test instead of the t-test. So to do that, go to Statistics, Non-Parametric Statistics, Two-Sample Wilcoxon Test. And again, you're going to pick your grouping variable and your response variable. Again, decide if you want a two-sided test or less than or greater than test. And we're just going to do the default kind of a test. And we'll hit OK. And then we'll get our Wilcox test. And notice our Wilcox p-value is, in this case, 0.05. So if we were testing at a 5% level, it would actually make a difference in what kind of test we used. Often, both tests will give you the same result.
So there's just 2 more things that I want to mention here. The first is that if you've been doing some graphs and some analyses and have generated a set of commands in your script window, you can save that script and come back to it, which you might want to do if, for example, you want to come back and add titles to your graphs or organize them all on one page. So to do that, go to File, Save Script As, and then you can type in whatever you want to call it. So for example, then the next time you open up Rcmdr, you can go to Open Script File, and you can start off right where you left off. And so you click Exit. Something's going to come up and say Save Workspace Image. Always say yes to this question, because if you've created any data sets in your session, saying yes here will save them so that they'll be available the next time you open up R and R.